Okay, so we've got some really fascinating stuff to unpack today, this whole smart card thing, you know. It's way bigger than I initially thought.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing when you start peeling back the layers.
Yeah, and you sent over some really in-depth info about the global market and
The market report, right.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive.
Yeah, it looks like we're talking about a really, really significant industry, like right now as we speak.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, just in 2025 alone.
Yeah, and not just significant now, but poised for some serious growth too.
Absolutely. The projections are,
I mean, it's not just a little blip, it's
no,
like,
no, no, it's a full-on
yeah, a full-on track.
trajectory, upward trajectory.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
So our mission today, I guess, is to really, get into the nuts and bolts of this market, figure out what's driving it, where the biggest opportunities are, what to really look out for.
yeah, potential, right. Like, where's the smart money
Mhm.
going? What are the trends?
Exactly. And we're going to be looking at a lot of different things. I mean, there are so many different types of smart cards out there.
Oh, yeah, contactless, the whole nine yards.
Uh-huh. And so many different ways they're being used. It's not just like, your credit card anymore.
No, not at all.
So we'll dive into that, look at different industries, and then also I think it'd be really interesting to see how this whole smart card thing is playing out in different parts of the world.
Yeah, geographically, the adoption rates are really interesting. I mean, you've got some areas that are just taking off and then others that are, a little bit more established.
Yeah, for sure. So our primary source today is this market report you sent over, right? It's pretty comprehensive, kind of lays out the whole landscape for 2025, and then gives us projections all the way up to 2033.
Yeah, it's super detailed. It breaks things down by, like you said, by the different components.
Hmm.
So, we're talking about the memory that goes into these cards, the microprocessors. Those are getting really sophisticated now. And then the various types of cards, like you mentioned, contactless, hybrid, dual interface. And then even further, it gets into the different functions of these cards, right? So are we talking about transactions, communication, security, access control? Like, what's the main purpose of the card?
Uh-huh.
And then it also segments by the actual offering. So are we talking about the smart cards themselves or the readers that you need to use them?
Mhm.
And then, of course, it breaks it down by different industry verticals. So like BFSI, that's your banking, financial services, insurance. Then you've got telecommunications, government, healthcare, education, retail, transportation, you name it.
Yeah, it seems like they're being used everywhere.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the regional analysis is really interesting too. I mean, it goes into specific market sizes and growth rates for North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, South America, Middle East, Africa, and it even goes deeper, like country by country within those regions.
Wow, okay. So a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the big picture, though. In 2025, what's the global market size looking like?
All right, so big picture, 2025, we're looking at a projected global market size of $12.46 billion USD.
Okay, that's a pretty hefty chunk of change. I mean, that's not small potatoes, right?
No, not at all. And it's only going to get bigger.
That's what I was going to ask. It's not just a one-time thing. What's the trajectory looking like going forward?
So projections show that by 2033, we could be looking at a market worth $22.39 billion USD.
Wow.
Yeah, so that translates to a compound annual growth rate, your CAGR, of 7.60%.
Okay, so we're talking serious sustained growth here year on year. I mean, that's got to be driven by some pretty powerful forces.
Oh, yeah. There are some really interesting things at play.
The report highlights a couple of key drivers, right?
Right, right. So one of the big ones, and this is something we're seeing across so many industries, is this push for energy efficiency.
Yeah, sustainability. It's the buzzword, right?
It is, and for good reason.
Eesh.
I mean, we got to figure out how to do more with less, right? And smart cards can actually play a role there.
How so?
Well, think about things like smart grids. Those are becoming more and more common. Or like building management systems that are all about optimizing energy use. Smart cards can be part of the security infrastructure for those systems, making sure that only authorized people are accessing and controlling them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's just the constant advancement of technology in general. I mean, the chips that go into these cards are getting more and more powerful, which means we can do more with them,
Yeah, more applications, more possibilities.
Exactly. And that drives adoption.
Yeah.
People see the potential, the convenience, the security, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'm in.
Makes sense. No, it's a global market, but I'd imagine the picture looks pretty different depending on where you are in the world. Like North America seems to be a major hub, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. North America is currently the biggest player, accounting for over 40% of the global revenue.
Wow. Over 40%.
Yeah, it's significant. In 2025, their market is estimated to be around $4.61 billion USD, and they're projected to see a CAGR of 6.1% between 2025 and 2033.
So strong and steady growth. And within North America, I'm guessing the U.S. is kind of the 800-pound gorilla.
Yep, you got it.
Mm.
United States, they're estimated to hit $3.64 billion in 2025 with a CAGR of 5.9%. And one of the things driving that, besides just the general market forces, is the fact that they've got some pretty stringent government regulations, especially in things like banking and healthcare.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. High security industry.
Right, exactly. So that kind of creates a fertile ground for smart card adoption because you've got this regulatory push for security and data protection.
So it's not just about the tech itself, but also the policy landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
What about our neighbors to the north and south? How do Canada and Mexico fit into the North American picture?
So Canada, they're looking at a market of around $553.22 million in 2025 with a CAGR of 6.9%, which is actually a bit higher than the U.S.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and one thing that seems to be playing a role there is that they've got a lot of activity in the electric power sector. Smart meters, secure access for energy infrastructure, things like that.
So it's kind of a sector-specific driver.
In a way, yeah. And then Mexico, their market is estimated to be around $419.53 million in 2025 with a TKGR of 6.6%. So, they're definitely part of this growth story too.
Makes sense. So overall, North America is a big deal. Now, what about Europe? They're usually pretty forward-thinking when it comes to tech.
Oh yeah, Europe is a major player for sure. They account for over 30% of the global revenue. So in 2025, we're looking at a market size of $3.61 billion and a projected CAGR of 6.6%. One thing that's really driving things there is this whole push for digital identity systems and data security initiatives, a lot of it coming from the European Union.
Oh, yeah, they're big on data privacy.
Huge. So that kind of top-down approach where you have these EU-wide initiatives, it really helps to standardize and promote the use of secure technologies like smart cards.
It creates a kind of level playing field.
Exactly. And you've got some key players within Europe driving a lot of the growth.
Yeah, like the UK and Germany seem to be pretty active in this space, right?
Absolutely. The UK's smart card market is estimated at $600.05 million in 2025 with a CAGR of 7.4%. They've always been kind of early adopters of new tech, and it seems like that's playing out here too.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to experiment and try new things.
Right, and then Germany, their market's a bit bigger, estimated at $715.45 million in 2025 with a CAGR of 6.8%. And one thing that's interesting about Germany is that they've got this really strong base of existing technology providers in the country.
Oh, yeah, they're known for their engineering prowess.
Exactly. So they've got that kind of homegrown expertise, which definitely helps.
Right, so it's not just about adopting the tech, it's about being able to build and support it locally.
Really?
Now, the report doesn't just focus on the big players, right? I mean, there are a bunch of other countries in Europe that are part of this story, too.
Oh, tons. I mean, France, Italy, Russia, Spain, all the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, they're all in the mix. Plus Switzerland, Luxembourg, the whole game's here.
And each with their own little flavor.
Exactly. Different market dynamics, different growth rates, but all contributing to this overall European growth trajectory.
Cool. Okay, so we've talked about North America, we've talked about Europe. Now, let's shift gears to the region that seems to be growing the fastest, Asia Pacific or APAC, right?
Oh, yeah, APAC is the one to watch for sure. I mean, their CAGR of 10.3% from 2025 to 2033, that's pretty impressive.
That is huge.
Yeah, huge. And it makes sense when you think about it. I mean, you've got rapid economic growth happening across the region, massive urbanization, and this incredibly fast adoption of digital payments in a lot of APAC countries.
Right, they're kind of leapfrogging over some of those earlier stages of development.
In a way, yeah. They're going straight to the cutting edge.
Yeah. And I'm guessing China and India are the big drivers there.
Oh, absolutely. China's the biggest market in APAC, estimated at $1.26 billion in 2025, with an AGR of 9.8%. And one of the really interesting things happening there is that you've got more and more domestic manufacturers getting into the smart card game.
Oh, so they're not just importing the tech, they're building it themselves.
Exactly. They're developing their own expertise, which is really cool to see. And then India, I mean, talk about a huge market. Their projected CAGR is 12.2%, and their market size in 2025 is estimated at $299.04 million. And it's not just the size of the population there, it's this whole push towards a digital economy that's creating so many opportunities.
It's like a perfect storm for smart card adoption.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just China and India either. You've got Japan, South Korea, Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, and all of Southeast Asia. They're all contributing to this growth story.
So it's really a pan-Asian phenomenon.
Yeah, very much so. And again, each market has its own unique characteristics. Some are driven by advanced infrastructure, some by high levels of technological adoption, some by specific government initiatives. It's a really diverse landscape.
Okay, so we've covered the powerhouses, North America, Europe, APAC. Now let's talk about South America. What's the outlook there?
So South America, they account for a bit over 5% of the global revenue.
Mm.
Their market size in 2025 is estimated at $473.48 million, with a CAGR of 8.3%.
Okay, so healthy growth, but maybe not quite at the pace of APAC.
Right, but still significant. And one thing that's interesting about South America is that they've got a really strong network of local system developers and technology suppliers, which is a big driver of adoption.
Oh, so they've got the expertise on the ground to really implement and support this technology.
Exactly. And Brazil is the big player down there. They're the largest market in South America, estimated at $202.65 million in 2025, with a CGR of 8.9%.
Hmm.
And similar to what we saw in Canada, it seems like the increasing demand for energy efficiency is playing a role there too.
Interesting. So this energy efficiency thing is popping up in a few different places. And are there any other notable markets in South America?
Yeah, you've got Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile. They're all contributing to the regional growth as well.
Okay, cool. What about the Middle East? It seems like they've been investing heavily in technology in recent years.
Oh yeah, the Middle East is definitely a region to watch. They account for around 2% of the global revenue, with a market size of $498.40 million in 2025, and a projected CAGR of 8.9%. And a lot of that growth is being fueled by government initiatives that are focused on expanding digital services and upgrading their infrastructure.
Makes sense. They're trying to position themselves as leaders in the digital economy.
Exactly. And some of the key markets there are Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt. They're all showing really strong potential.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about Africa. It often gets overlooked, but it's got a ton of potential, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Africa currently represents around 1% of the global revenue, so it's still relatively small, but it's growing at a good clip, with a CAGR of 7.9%. Their market size in 2025 is estimated at $274.12 million.
Okay, not bad. And what's driving that growth?
A couple things. The report mentions that in some countries, they actually have legislative requirements that are driving smart card adoption. And we're also seeing increasing adoption in the banking and retail sectors, which are obviously big drivers in any market.
Yeah, for sure. And are there any particular countries in Africa that we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, the report highlights South Africa and Nigeria as the two most significant markets to watch in the region.
Cool. So we've really gone around the globe here. It's amazing to see how this technology is being adopted and adapted in such different ways depending on the region.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So we've talked about the overall market size, we've talked about regional trends, but now let's get a little bit more granular. The report breaks down the market in a bunch of different ways. One of them is by component, memory versus MPU microprocessors.
Right, the brains of the operation.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the breakdown there? Which one is dominating the market?
So the report's projecting that MPU microprocessors are going to take the lead in the market. And this makes sense when you think about the kinds of applications that are becoming more and more common. People want more than just simple storage on their cards. They want actual processing power.
Yeah, more functionality, more complexity.
Right, like advanced encryption algorithms, multi-factor authentication, even running little applets on the card itself. And that requires a more powerful chip, like an MPU.
But memory is still important, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's actually the fastest growing component segment.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. Even with all this processing power, you still need somewhere to store all that data securely, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Whether it's your digital identity, your authentication credentials, the data for contactless payments, it all needs to be stored somewhere safe. So even though MPUs are getting more powerful, the demand for robust and secure memory on these cards is just skyrocketing.
Got it. So it's not an either a situation, it's both.
Right, you need the processing power and the secure storage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Now let's move on to the different types of cards. Contact, contactless, hybrid, dual interface. What's the current landscape looking like?
All right, so right now, the king of the hill is the contactless smart card.
Yeah, those are everywhere now.
Right. I mean, think about it. Contactless payments, it's just so convenient. You tap and go, and then you've got building access, public transportation systems. They're all moving to contactless.
Yeah, I guess the pandemic probably accelerated that trend too, right?
Oh, for sure. People got used to not touching things if they could avoid it.
Makes sense. And what about the growth potential? Where's the most exciting stuff happening in terms of card types?
So the real star of the show right now is the dual interface smart card. They're seeing really rapid growth.
Why is that?
Well, the beauty of a dual interface card is that it can do both. It can communicate through that physical contact interface, like when you swipe a card,
Yeah.
but it can also communicate wirelessly through a contactless interface, like when you tap.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Exactly. And that makes it incredibly versatile. You can use it for payments, for identification, for building access, you name it. So that flexibility is a big part of why they're becoming so popular.
Cool. Now, the report also looks at the function of the cards: transaction, communication, security, and access control. Those seem kind of intertwined, don't they?
Yeah, they definitely overlap, but
Mm.
it's helpful to think about the primary purpose of the card in a given application.
Okay, I see.
So right now, the biggest segment in terms of function is communication.
Really? More than transactions.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the rise of contactless payments and the whole NFC ecosystem that supports it. Plus, you've got the Internet of Things growing like crazy, and that relies heavily on secure communication between devices.
Right. So it's not just about buying things, it's about devices talking to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in terms of growth, the transaction segment is actually the one to watch.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, more and more transactions are happening digitally, right? And smart cards are a big part of that. They offer a lot more security and data storage capability than those old magnetic stripe cards, which is crucial for things like access control, transportation, and obviously payments.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, the more we move towards a digital world, the more important those transaction-based cards become.
Absolutely. And the report also breaks things down in terms of the offering. So are we talking about the smart cards themselves or the readers that go with them?
Right, right. So which one is bigger?
No surprise here. Smart cards themselves are currently the dominant part of the offering. I mean, they're the foundation of so many programs, especially in government and financial institutions, that require really high levels of security for all that sensitive data.
Uh-huh.
And they also make things more efficient and cost-effective. You can automate a lot of processes, get rid of manual checks, reduce your reliance on paper-based systems.
Yeah, I can see how that would appeal to a lot of organizations.
Big time.
Hmm.
But the real growth story on the offering side is actually smart card readers.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, as smart cards become more popular and get used in more and more applications, the demand for readers just naturally increases. I mean, you need a reader to interact with a contact-based smart card, right?
Yeah, to physically read the chip.
Exactly. And even for contactless cards, you still need readers for things like payment terminals and access control points.
Makes sense. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Totally. More cards, more readers. More readers, more possibilities for using cards.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about industry verticals. Where are we seeing the most widespread use of smart cards right now?
So the biggest vertical, the one that's really embracing smart cards, is retail.
Oh, that makes sense. They're dealing with tons of transactions every day.
Right. And it's not just about payments. Retailers are using smart cards for all sorts of things. Security obviously is a big one. They want to make sure those transactions are safe. But they're also using them to speed up checkout lines, improve customer loyalty programs, you name it.
Yeah, they're always looking for ways to improve the customer experience.
Exactly. And that focus on convenience and efficiency, that's what's really driving smart card adoption in retail.
Makes sense. Now, which vertical is seeing the most rapid growth?
Transportation is the one that's really taking off.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, think about public transit systems. They're under a lot of pressure to make fare collection more secure and efficient, right?
Yeah, for sure. And they've got to handle huge volumes of people.
Exactly. So we're seeing more and more cities around the world upgrading their infrastructure to support smart card-based ticketing systems.
Makes sense. It's kind of a win-win. It's more convenient for the riders, and it's more efficient for the transit authorities.
Absolutely. And of course, it's not just retail and transportation. The report highlights a bunch of other important verticals like BFSI, telecommunications, government, and healthcare, education.
Right. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, pretty much. Smart cards are finding their way into all sorts of industries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the size of the market, the regional differences, the different ways to segment it. But what's really driving all of this? What are the fundamental forces behind this growth?
Well, At the core of it, I think it comes down to three main things. First, there's this ever-increasing need for better security solutions.
Yeah, data breaches are in the news all the time.
It's a constant battle, right? And smart cards offer a really robust and proven way to protect sensitive data. So that's a huge driver.
Makes sense. And the second thing?
Supportive legislation. Governments around the world are starting to realize the importance of things like digital identity and secure transactions.
Yeah, they're starting to put some frameworks in place.
Right. And those frameworks often encourage or even mandate the use of smart card technology. So that's another big driver.
Okay, and the third one?
The big overarching trend, the shift towards electronic payments and the digitization of everything.
Yeah, we're moving towards a cashless society, aren't we?
In a lot of ways, yeah. And smart cards are a key enabler of that shift. They're the secure foundation for so many of these digital transactions and services.
It's like the trust infrastructure for the digital world.
Exactly. So you've got this combination of security concerns, government support, and this broader digital transformation that's really fueling the smart card market.
Got it. Makes sense. But it's not all smooth sailing, right? I mean, there got to be some challenges facing this industry, too.
Oh, for sure. No industry is without its hurdles. One of the main challenges highlighted in the report is the cost of manufacturing.
Yeah, these are pretty sophisticated pieces of technology, right?
Right. And making them secure and reliable, that costs money. So the relatively high manufacturing costs can be a barrier, especially in markets that are really price sensitive.
Makes sense. And what about competition from other technologies? I mean, mobile payments are exploding right now. Is that a threat?
Yeah, that's definitely something the smart card industry is keeping a close eye on. I mean, you've got mobile payment systems, other forms of digital ID that don't rely on a physical card.
Yeah, it's all getting pretty virtual.
Right.
Okay.
So the challenge for the smart card industry is to keep innovating, to keep demonstrating the value that they bring to the table, even as these other technologies emerge.
To stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And the report also points to a few interesting trends that are shaping the future of the market. One that caught my eye was the increasing use of smart cards in the telecom sector.
Oh, yeah, beyond just SIM cards.
Right. SIM cards are still a big part of it, but we're starting to see them used for things like secure authentication for other services as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like a natural extension of their existing role. And then another interesting trend is the increasing number of federal programs and legislation around the world that are either mandating or actively supporting the use of smart card technology for various applications.
So we're seeing that government support playing out in a very concrete way.
Absolutely. And the report even gives us a couple of little snapshots of what's happening in the competitive landscape. For example, in November of 2024, GSEC plus Devrient, which is one of the big players in this space, they launched their BPS CIVO banknote processing equipment.
Okay, so not a smart card itself, but...
Right, not directly, but it's still relevant. I mean, it shows that they're focused on improving security and efficiency within the financial infrastructure, which is an area where their smart card expertise is really valuable.
Yeah, it all kind of feeds into the same ecosystem.
Totally. And then another interesting development was in January 2025, Thales Alenia Space, they're a joint venture between Thales and Leonardo, they announced some positive findings from a feasibility study they were doing called Ascend.
Okay, and what's that all about?
So this project is looking at using aerospace-based information centers to contribute to the EU Green Deal and to kind of revolutionize the European aerospace and technological system.
Wow, sounds ambitious.
Oh yeah, big time. And again, it's not directly about smart cards, but it's interesting because it shows how the principles of secure data handling and advanced technology that are so central to the smart card world are being applied to these big, complex challenges.
It's like the underlying principles are transferable.
Exactly. So I think it's safe to say that the future of the smart card market is pretty bright.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're here to stay. So to kind of wrap things up here, it's clear that the smart card market is this really dynamic and growing ecosystem. It's global, it's got all these different facets, and it's driven by some pretty powerful forces, from security concerns to government initiatives to this whole shift towards a digital world.
Absolutely. And it's really cool to see how different regions are embracing this technology for different reasons and applying it to different challenges.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Not at all. And the fact that we're seeing such strong growth in areas like memory, contactless cards, and the transportation sector, that tells us something about where the real action is going to be in the coming years.
Yeah, where the innovation is happening, where the adoption is really taking off.
Exactly. And the activity we're seeing from the big players, those little snapshots we talked about,
Mm.
that just reinforces the idea that there's this constant push towards more efficient and more secure solutions,
Hmm.
both in the physical and digital worlds.
It's all connected, right?
Totally.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about all these different uses for smart cards, but I can't help but wonder what other applications are out there that we haven't even thought of yet.
Or I'm sure there are a ton.
Right. I mean, we're just scratching the surface. What everyday objects or interactions might be transformed by smart card technology in the future? What new levels of convenience or security might we take for granted thanks to these tiny but powerful little tools? I mean, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's exciting to think about what the future holds.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me. It's been a fascinating journey.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's all for today. We'll see you next time.
See you later.